My girlfriend cheated on me in our house and at work, and she stabbed me with a pencil, justifying that she was under the influence of cocaine. I walked in on my girlfriend, Ashley, with two random guys, and she stabbed me. I tried to end my life and spent 8 weeks in a psychiatric ward. I became a homeless addict. A few months ago, I shared a story in another thread about how I got cheated on by my college girlfriend, Emily, and the terrible obsession I developed to get revenge on her. This is relevant to the story I'm about to share, which took place 7 years after my experience with Emily. I got into another relationship and got cheated on again. However, this time I didn't seek revenge, I just walked away. My revenge story in the other thread is a cautionary tale of what not to do after getting cheated on, while this story is about how I learned from my past and tried to do the right thing, even though it was incredibly difficult. After the horrible incident of infidelity with my college girlfriend Emily, I went on a long, tedious mission to get even with her. This was followed by years of bitterness and resentment towards women. After college, I moved down to Argentina, where I spent 4 years involved in drugs and casual relationships, never considering getting into a serious relationship or allowing myself to become vulnerable with another woman. I fully admit that I was a degenerate during this time. After several years, I found myself more depressed than ever. The drugs weren't working anymore, and I grew tired of having these shallow and temporary relationships. I decided to drop everything I was doing in Argentina and return to Canada. I called an old friend and made arrangements to move into his place temporarily until I got back on my feet. When I moved back, I decided to quit my destructive drug habit that had developed following my college breakup with Emily. It wasn't easy, but I was committed to giving happiness another shot. I also decided to give dating another chance. I felt pathetic for giving up on finding someone special just because a girl in college broke my heart by cheating on me. A few months after moving into my friend's place, I had been on several good dates with women in the area and started opening up to the idea of allowing myself to grow close to a woman again. One day, I met a girl on a dating app. We will call her Jessica. Jessica was 26 and I was 24. She had burgundy red hair, which was not quite orange but more of a fluorescent natural red. She had a 5-year-old son who, honestly, I adored and who looked a bit like me. Jessica had just come out of a terribly abusive marriage and was in a similar position to me. She had also gone through a period of grief and addiction, but had recently cleaned herself up and was ready to try dating again. This worked well for both of us because we completely understood each other's emotional state and allowed one another to proceed slowly without expecting too much. We both had fears of commitment and trust issues and were still a bit emotionally fragile due to our past relationships and bad habits. Despite this, we had many things in common. Jessica even said she felt like she was dating the male version of herself and liked it because we allowed each other to be completely authentic. As the months rolled on, we grew closer and closer. Her son and I got along well, and he even called me Dad. He was too young to remember his biological father, and I was the only father figure he had ever known. The day I taught him how to pee standing up on a tree sealed the deal for me, and from that point on, he was my son. I got a job at a manufacturing plant. Ashley and I worked at a nightclub. Things were going well. We moved into an apartment together, bought a car, and were in the process of trying to buy a house. We were planning to get married and have a child. We only occasionally smoked marijuana and felt like we had fully recovered from our past addictions and emotional wreckage. We both crawled out of the depths of real darkness and found some peace and happiness together. Or so I thought. Ashley and I never had any jealousy or suspicions. We fully trusted each other, never went through each other's phones, and knew each other VDJATES passwords and login info, so we never had any issues around trust until this happened. Typically, I would get up early in the morning before getting ready for work to walk Ashley into the apartment from the parking lot because she wouldn't get home until after 4 o'clock or 5 a.m. from work, and it was a bit of a sketchy walk. The club was typically only open until 3 a.m. most days, but recently started staying open until 5 a.m. most nights of the week, or so Ashley told me. One morning, Ashley said she was leaving work a little later because she had to drop a friend off at her house. She told me this only like 10 minutes before she would ordinarily arrive home. It usually took her about 45 minutes to get home from work, so I found it a bit odd that she told me so last second. I knew where her friend lived, so it may have only taken an extra 10 minutes to drop her off on the way to our place. She ended up getting home about an hour and a half later than usual, and something seemed a bit off. She looked high, not on marijuana, but it struck me as if she was on cocaine or MDMA. I briefly confronted her about this, but she brushed it off quickly and said she was late because her friend's car broke down and they tried to get it fixed but couldn't. That's why it took so long to get home. This was the first time in almost 2 years that anything like this happened. So I quickly pushed down my suspicions and chalked it up as me being a bit paranoid because of my past experiences with infidelity and dishonesty. I told myself Ashley would never do anything sketchy. She had been through the same thing I went through, and she knew in full detail my story about my last relationship. She would never do anything like that to me, especially since it happened to her too. I wasn't even that suspicious of her cheating. I was more suspicious that she was doing hard drugs again. Slowly but surely, incidents like this started happening more frequently, DJ first once a month and eventually all the way up to happening almost every week. There were a few nights where I was almost positive she was high on drugs, and we fought about it. She finally admitted one day when I thought she was high that she did half a line of cocaine once because she was tired and needed a pick-me-up to get through work. But that was all she did. At this point, she was coming home at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, or even 8 a.m. some mornings regularly. Her club closed at 3 o'clock or 5 a.m. depending on the day of the week. She always had excuses like the car wouldn't start. She would go to her friend's house after work to smoke marijuana, or she went to a Waffle House with some of her coworkers after their shifts. Then one morning, her text messages seemed severely suspicious. She would respond promptly, and it really seemed like she was forcing herself to sound genuine when texting me. Late one night, Ashley texted me saying she was on her way home at 6 a.m., 2 hours after the club closed. By 6:30, I went outside to the parking lot to walk her in when she arrived. It was snowing heavily, and there was a blizzard in the area. An hour went by, and I heard nothing from her. I texted and called her repeatedly, but she didn't answer. Eventually, I got a message from her saying she was almost home. Another hour passed before she finally pulled up into the parking lot. The time was 9:30 a.m. I had to call out from work because I couldn't leave her son home alone. I usually left for work at 7:30. Completely covered in snow, I walked up to the car and opened her door. Ashley looked at me like she had seen a ghost and began rambling nervously and almost incoherently. She said she got pulled over but was let go without a ticket. She mentioned the car ran out of gas, so she had to stop to fill up. She also said her friend was having a mental breakdown, so she stayed with her for a while to help. She even started blaming me for things, saying she wouldn't have gotten pulled over if I had gotten the registration done sooner. The thing is, she could have told me all this by texting or calling me at any point. It was all very suspicious. The whole time, she wouldn't stop talking, giving me very inconsistent stories while we walked into the apartment. I couldn't help but notice how dilated her pupils were and how she was visibly grinding her teeth. Obviously, I was very angry at this point, but I was so exhausted and cold from standing outside for hours and worrying about her that I temporarily let it go and tried to distract myself with some video games. I was convinced she was doing cocaine at work or after work. What else was she up to? Who was she doing cocaine with? Just her coworkers and friends? Was she doing other drugs? Was she cheating? I was only mildly worried that she was cheating. I was more concerned about her drug use. We both had our runs in the past with drugs, hence why we only smoked marijuana nowadays and occasionally had a drink. We weren't sober like people in a 12-step program, but we tried to keep it very mellow. Her lying about the drugs was even more concerning to me than the actual drug use because it was triggering my PTSD from my ex, Emily, who lied to me and cheated on me in college. I was literally at the point where I didn't even care if she did the drugs. I just wanted her to be honest with me. I couldn't stand the thought of being in another relationship where my girlfriend was lying to me about anything. My mind began to spiral. I felt completely betrayed. Ashley and I had helped build each other back up after our tumultuous pasts, and now we had wonderful lives. I never thought she would lie to me about anything. We had such an open, trustworthy relationship and had never experienced any problems with this type of stuff before. I got obsessed with trying to find out if she was lying about the drugs. I needed undeniable proof. The next day, when she left for work, I tore up the house looking for something. I had no idea what I was looking for: a bag of cocaine, some pills maybe. I went through every drawer, every nook and cranny of every piece of furniture, coat pockets, on top of the cabinets, anywhere she could hide something. I found nothing. I tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid, that my PTSD and insecurities about my past relationship were triggering me, and I was just getting obsessive with trying to find something that wasn't there. I decided I would stop trying to find out if she was lying because if I was wrong, my behavior could ruin a good relationship. I thought Ashley would never lie to me, or even worse, cheat on me. She had a horrible experience with her ex-husband cheating on her while she was pregnant, and he also hid a drug problem from her, so I couldn't imagine her doing the same thing to me that her ex-husband did to her. So I let things go. She came home at normal times again for a while, which calmed me down a lot. I began to feel bad for my paranoia until one night. I was at a local pool hall playing at a table with a random guy we will call Jerry. While Jerry and I were chatting, I mentioned that my girlfriend worked at the club. Jerry's sister, Sarah, was hanging out with us while we played pool and said she worked at the same club a couple of months ago. I asked her if she knew Ashley, and she said she did, but they weren't really that close. They mostly knew each other in passing. I then expressed that I wished Ashley had a day job where we could be home together more at night when I got off work. I told Sarah that since the club typically closes at 4 o'clock, I would only see Ashley for about an hour or two before I left for work in the morning. Sarah then looked at me, confused, and said, "I thought they closed at 2 a.m. When I worked there, we only closed at 4 o'clock on Friday and Saturday nights." I told Sarah they changed the hours after she left. Sarah then told me that her roommate still worked there and never mentioned the closing times had changed because she still came home just after 2 o'clock during the week. It got awkward fast, but I shrugged it off and finished the game of pool. After the game, I went home, and I couldn't get what Sarah told me out of my head. I looked up the club Ashley worked at, and indeed it said they were only open till 4 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights and 2 a.m. every other night. I again convinced myself that they must have not updated the times on their website yet after they made changes or something. Deep down, I knew Ashley was up to something, but I was so scared of being lied to again after years of avoiding relationships for that exact reason. I was in full-fledged denial. The next day was a Sunday night. I texted Ashley and asked her when she would be off that night, and she said she would be home at 4:30 and would text me when she was on her way. So at 2:30 a.m., I called the club and asked if I could speak with her. It was about her son. The manager answered and told me they had closed at 2 o'clock and Ashley had already left. I felt like I was going to throw up. I decided I was going to confront Ashley. I don't know when she came home that night because I ended up drinking until I passed out and didn't go out to the parking lot to walk her in. When I woke up, she was asleep next to me. I got up and went into the living room where I saw her purse sitting on the coffee table. I picked it up and started to go through it. At first, I didn't find anything, no drugs or anything shady. Then, tucked away in one of the small zippers, I found an empty baggie and a rolled-up dollar bill. Was this what I had been looking for all this time? I just put it down on the coffee table and went to work, hoping she would see it and know that I found it. When I came home, she was getting ready for work. She was in front of the bathroom mirror doing her makeup, specifically her eyeliner. I leaned up against the door and looked at her through the mirror. She looked up and said, "Hey, babe, what's up? How was work?" I guessed she didn't see that I found the rolled-up dollar bill. I replied, "Hey, we need to talk about something." I proceeded to tell her that I called the club, and they told me they close at 2 o'clock on Sundays. She immediately ignored the entire topic of her lying about what time the club closes and proceeded to scream at me for being controlling, obsessive, not trusting her, and having no right to call the club in the first place. It didn't faze me. I had made sure that I wasn't just being paranoid. What she was doing was grade A gaslighting, which I was well experienced with because of my previous relationship. The fight continued to escalate. I accused her of doing cocaine behind my back and lying to me about her drug habit. I called her a cokehead, and that's when she turned around and swung at me with her eyeliner. I turned in reflex and she lodged the eyeliner pencil about 1.5 inches into my shoulder. She then proceeded to punch me about 6 times in the face. I didn't react or hit her back. I was mostly just in shock. Once she finished beating me and screaming, we both just stood there, gazing at each other. I pulled the pencil out of my arm and dropped it on the floor. I walked out of the bathroom and into the kitchen, where I got some duct tape and patched up the hole in my arm. I have a tattoo right where she stabbed me, and I still have a nice healthy scar there to this day. I left the apartment and started my walk to the liquor store. Ashley was blowing up my phone, doing the whole thing where she apologized, and when she didn't get a response, she began to throw insults and then repeated that cycle over and over. I bought a bottle of whiskey and proceeded to walk and drink and walk and drink. I eventually blacked out and woke up to none other than Jerry, who I played pool with the other day, and some other guy I didn't know trying to pick me up out of the snow. They put me in their car. Apparently they were on their way to work and saw me fall and not move on the side of the street, so they pulled over to make sure I was okay. Today, I wonder where those guys worked, because it must have been super early in the morning. I had been walking for hours at that point and probably blacked out long before I fell. I had finished the whole bottle of whiskey very quickly. When I was in the car with them, they asked me what was going on and why I was walking around at that time of night that far from town. I could barely talk. It felt like my lips were frozen. I was able to tell them where I lived, and they dropped me off at home. When I went inside, Ashley was shocked and tried to get me to lay down and get me warm. I blacked out again shortly after and woke up in a pool of vomit in my bed. I got up, took a shower, and went out into the living room where Ashley was sitting on the couch, crying. We began to talk. She apologized for stabbing me with the eyeliner pencil and admitted that she had started doing coke again. She had been going to her co-worker's place. A few of them lived together in an apartment. They were all females, and she would do coke with them before coming home. She first started doing it to help her get through work, and it just kept escalating. I asked her if it was just coke or if it was other stuff too, because there were some nights where she seemed like she was on more than just coke. She admitted that every once in a while she took a pill to take the edge off the coke before she came home, but she did this rarely. We ended the conversation civilly, and she promised to stop doing drugs and lying to me about where she was and that she would never hide anything from me again. But now that I knew she was capable of lying and keeping things from me, I was a bit more on my toes with things than usual. Weeks went by, and things were kind of back to normal for a while. The only odd thing was Ashley was working more often than usual. She would cover for people more or pick up extra shifts randomly. Before, she only worked 4 days a week, but now she was working 6 or 7 days. It didn't become suspicious until I noticed that if we had a fight on a night she wasn't scheduled to work, she would suddenly have to go in, immediately start getting ready, and tell me she texted her manager and asked if she could come in because she needed to get away from me. We only had one car, and this was before Uber was really everywhere, so I couldn't go check out her work to see if she really was at work. But then, one day, my friend was over while Ashley was at work, and we were just playing video games and decided we wanted to go out to get some Taco Bell. Neither of us had it in forever. We had the munchies and wanted to find one. So I pulled out my phone to look on Google Maps for the nearest Taco Bell. That's when I noticed something I had never seen before. Ashley and I shared a Google account on our Androids at the time, so it showed both of our search histories for locations we typed into Google Maps. On that very day, she had searched for some random location in a nearby neighborhood when she left for work. My head began to spiral again, and I told my friend I no longer felt up to it, and just wanted to go to bed, so he left a bit confused. I double-checked everything on my phone and even went on my computer and did some searches to see if there was any way I was misinterpreting it, but I was not. When Ashley came home, I asked her if she really went to work that night. She got real defensive and started accusing me of being paranoid. I then proceeded to show her the Google Maps and how someone searched this location right when she supposedly left for work, and it was not me. She proceeded to tell me the most epic lie I've ever heard. She said, "I never went there or searched it. Google is wrong. It's probably just a glitch." All right. Now I finally admitted to myself, I am dating a liar again. I grabbed a few things and got a motel in town. I spent many nights fighting with Ashley over the phone and crying while watching crappy cable TV. I was so angry that for the second time in a row, I was dating someone who lies to me and keeps things from me. One of our fights got so heated that we completely stopped talking for 2 days. We didn't break up, though. Just stopped talking. Something inside me was desperately hoping that maybe she was just doing coke and drugs, not cheating. But I was super suspicious that she was cheating at this point and couldn't let go of it. After a couple of nights in the motel, I had convinced myself Ashley wasn't cheating. She was just back into her drug addiction, and I needed to help her get out of it. I know firsthand what drug addiction can do to someone, as it did to me once. I decided to reconcile with her. It was later at night, and I knew she would be back home in a few hours. I would meet her in the parking lot with some flowers or something. I borrowed a friend's car, went to the shop, bought some flowers, and headed home. I parked in the parking lot and began to wait for Ashley to get home. At around 2:45 a.m., I saw our car drive up to the parking lot, but I noticed someone in the passenger seat. It was Ashley. She wasn't driving. She was sitting in the passenger seat, and there was a man I didn't know driving my car. I just laid low and watched. When this random dude parked my car, I wasn't ready for what happened next. Another man also got out from the back seat. What the hell is happening? Who are these people? The three of them walked into our apartment. I pulled out my phone and began to write a text message to Ashley. I tried to act like I didn't know anything so that I could see what she would say. Maybe these were just platonic friends and she had nothing to hide. I texted her and asked if she was home yet from work and if I could come over and we could talk things out. I told her I wanted to apologize for yelling and saying some hurtful things during our fights. I didn't get any response. Messages back for about 15 minutes, and then I got a text from her saying, "I just got home, but I want some alone time. I do love you with all my heart. Let's talk tomorrow." My heart was beating out of my chest as I read the text. I banged my head on the steering wheel in rage while simultaneously crying. I got out of my car and decided to go inside and confront her. When I got to my apartment, the door was locked. I forgot my keys because I only brought the keys for my friend's car. I heard loud music playing on the other side of the door. I tried knocking, but no one answered. I walked around the corner where I knew our living room window and bedroom windows were. We were on the ground floor level. I peeped in through our living room window and saw no one. I was honestly hoping that I would see them just casually hanging out or something. But if they weren't in the living room, then where were they? I walked a little further down until I got to our bedroom window. The blinds were down, but I could see if I put my eyes on the edge of the window to look real close. When I leaned in to look around the blinds, my heart sank into my stomach. On the other side of the blinds, in our bed, was my beautiful girlfriend, Ashley, who I considered my son's mother, getting intimate with the two guys I saw her walk in with. I leaned up against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the ground, my face falling into my hands. I sat there for 5 minutes, vaguely hearing what was going on through the window above me. I contemplated going in and confronting all three of them. I was so filled with rage. I decided to get up and get back into the car. I started chain-smoking cigarettes as all my memories of the relationship that I cherished so much began to dismantle in my mind. Everything was a lie. Everything I thought about Ashley that made me love her so much started to dissolve. Now, a lot of you have read my story about when I was cheated on by my college ex-girlfriend, Emily. When Emily cheated on me, my rage led me to do everything I could to get the gnarliest revenge I could. In that story, I went completely overboard, and Emily ended up extremely broken and abused. Now, many years later, in my first relationship after Emily, I'm in the same position, but worse. This time, however, I decided not to get revenge on Ashley as I did on Emily. No, this time I'm going to end my own life. But first, I'm going to destroy Ashley. I started the car and drove. I stopped by a gas station that I knew sold some basic hunting and fishing equipment 24 hours a day. They didn't have any firearms, but they had some hunting and skinning knives. I bought the largest one they had and drove back to my motel, grabbed my keys to the apartment, and then headed home to confront Ashley. When I got there, I slowly and quietly opened the front door. I began to creep down the hallway to our bedroom, gripping the knife tightly, expecting one of the guys to maybe pop out. I inched up to my bedroom door. It was open, but the lights in the room were off, and I couldn't see anything inside. It was quiet. I didn't hear anything. Sweat was dripping down my face, and I was trying to control my shaking and breathing so no one would hear me come in. Scared of what I might see, I reached into the bedroom and flipped the light switch on. When the lights popped on, I just saw Ashley lying in the bed, naked and by herself. Was I hallucinating earlier or something? Or did those guys just leave before I got back? She didn't wake up, so I took a look around the room. I saw a condom wrapper on the nightstand next to her bed, which pretty much confirmed what I saw, and I now knew I wasn't hallucinating. Ashley and I never used condoms. When I took my first step into the bedroom, I heard the door to her son's room across the hall open. I turned around quickly, ready to confront one of the two guys I saw earlier, but of course it was just Ashley's son VDD, my son. My first thoughts were, what is Ashley's son doing here? Why didn't she take him to daycare or to her mom's house before she had two random dudes come over? Was the little kid there the entire time while she was at work or while she was with those men across the hall? What the hell is wrong with her? He looked up at me from his bedroom door. "Daddy, you're back!" And he rushed in to hug my leg. I put my hand on his head, looked at the knife in my other hand, then put the knife in my back pocket. I got down on one knee and told my stepson, "I'm going away for a while. I just wanted to say bye to you and Mom before I left." He then gave me the saddest face I've ever seen. I picked him up, took him back to bed, tucked him in, and told him goodbye. I knew it would be the last time I saw him, but I didn't want him to know he was about to never see me again. After that, I couldn't harm his mother. He couldn't grow up without his mother. He didn't deserve that, even if I thought she deserved to die. However, I still wanted to end my own life. I walked out of the apartment and started walking down the street, sobbing my eyes out. I took a seat on a bench at the bus stop, extracted the knife, and began slashing at my wrists. I was ready to die. For about 10 minutes, I cut at them, trying to get the blood to flow harder. Then a police car pulled up, and two cops got out. One of them said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I calmly told him, "I'm done." He radioed in for more cops, and before I knew it, there were like 15 or 20 of them surrounding me. They spent about 20 minutes trying to get me to put the knife down. I was bleeding all over. A cop walked closer to me and asked me to hand him the knife. I stared at the knife for a few seconds. Nothing could talk me off the ledge at this point. I also knew I couldn't get out of this situation without being thrown into a psychiatric ward. I raised the knife over my head and lunged at the officer. Before I could even take 2 steps, I was on the ground getting tasered, and they were piling on top of me, putting handcuffs on me. I had made one major miscalculation. I thought if I made a move towards the officer, they would for sure shoot me, but I forgot I was white, so unfortunately I was only tasered. The next thing I knew, I was riding in the back of the cruiser, and they took me to the hospital where they sedated me and patched me up. They gave me some sedatives that completely knocked me out. The next thing I knew, I woke up in what I later found out was a psychiatric ward for the severely insane. It was like jail or prison, but worse. You didn't know what day or time it was, and you got no communication with the outside world, or at least we didn't at this one. I'm not going to go into detail about what I experienced there. It was one of the darkest places I had ever seen in my life. I was in there for about 6 weeks before an attorney was able to get me released on a technicality. When I was released, I took a taxi home. It was about 3 hours away. When I got home, I had the taxi driver drop me off at a McDonald's near my apartment. I sat down and charged my phone. I didn't want to go back to that apartment, not after what I saw there. I had texts, missed calls, and voicemails from many people, including Ashley. I had obviously been let go from work, and my credit cards were all maxed out. Ashley clearly had been using them because she had a card for all my accounts. I called Ashley. Ashley was ecstatic to hear from me. She had been so worried and had no idea what had happened to me. I told her I would explain everything, but needed her to meet me at the McDonald's and not to bring her son. She was confused at first, but agreed to meet me after dropping her son off at daycare. Ashley later walked into the McDonald's and rushed to try and hug and kiss me, but I brushed her off and told her to sit down. This threw her off a bit, but she sat down, and I told her everything that happened, everything I saw before I was thrown into the ward. Her response shocked me. Ashley had the audacity to try and deny everything. She said I must have looked into the wrong apartment and saw someone else. I shook my head in disbelief and cut her off mid-sentence. I told her she needed to tell me the truth right now, and if she tried to lie to me again, I would get up and walk out of this McDonald's and she and her son would never see me again. I looked at her sternly in the eyes, and she could see I meant every word I said. I asked her one more time, "Have you been cheating on me?" She looked down at her lap and began to cry. She muttered, "Yes, I have." She proceeded to admit that her drug problem had gone from cocaine to crack, and she was also using heroin every night. That's why the guy was driving our car. She was too intoxicated to drive. I stared at her for about a minute before letting out a big sigh. I pulled my phone out of the charger and stood up. She looked up and asked, "Where are you going?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I'm going to go do drugs. It's all I can think to do right now." As I picked up my backpack, she asked me if we were still together. I told her, "No, I didn't mean I was going to stay if you told me the truth. I was going to leave either way. I just wanted to hear you admit it before I left." For the next few months, I pretty much lived on the road, basically homeless. I would hop from town to town, mostly selling drugs at strip clubs and crashing where I could. Sometimes I slept in motels, sometimes outside. I was doing a lot of my own product. I lost almost 65 pounds in these few months because sometimes I would go days without eating or sleeping. One day I woke up in a hospital. I had been having seizures and my internal organs had begun failing. I was severely malnourished. I'm 6'5" and was weighing in at 155 pounds, soaking wet after a big meal. Multiple doctors and therapists came in to see me every day trying to figure out what was going on with me. I spent about a month in the hospital recovering before I was discharged. The doctors recommended I seek a sobriety program. They concluded that I had no mental disorders other than PTSD and mostly just had a polysubstance addiction problem. When I was discharged from the hospital, I stayed at a halfway house shelter for almost 4 months. I found a sobriety program and began going to meetings and have never touched drugs again since I was released from the hospital. I got a new phone and number. Almost no one from my life prior to my stay in the hospital had any contact with me anymore. While I was in the halfway house, I started working out to try and regain some size. I looked like a beanpole when I was released from the halfway house. I got a job at a nearby gym as a personal trainer, a brand new career path for me, but the gym had become my new safe space where I felt okay. Fast forward 5 years to today. I am still sober. I weigh a healthy and lean 265 pounds. I'm happily married for 2 years and run my own lucrative business. The day I left the hospital, I thought long and hard about what I was going to do with my life. My instinct was to retreat into darkness. I still wanted to get back at Ashley for what she did, just like I did with Emily in college. After a few long periods of thought over the course of a few weeks, I decided the best revenge would be to live the best life I could, and, most importantly, to stop feeling sorry for myself for the things I went through. This changed the game for me. I stopped blaming others or the world for the things that happened to me. Looking back at this today, 5 years later, and where my life has led me, I am so happy I made the decision to try a different course of action. I don't even recognize myself anymore. When I wrote these stories about Emily and Ashley, I don't even see me. I see some other messed up kid. I turned 30 this weekend. I got sober a month before my birthday 5 years ago. If you would have told me back then that I would be where I am now, I would never have believed you. I am so happy I didn't take my own life, or even worse, take Ashley's life that day. I am so glad I decided to get up and keep trying at life. I had to fall a few times, but when I finally got up, I flew. I spoke with Ashley only once years after I left the McDonald's the day she admitted to cheating on me. After speaking with her, I got to say it's true what they say. The best revenge is living a good life.